Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Wolf Den. This is the Howling Gamers Podcast, where we talk about video games, movies, anime, and anything else that piques our interest. I am CyberWolfJimmy. Oh no,
There we go. Okay, now it's working. Now
we're
I'm getting.
good.
I didn't test this before. This is why you test things, folks. This is why you test things. You couldn't hear me there. Now you can hear me. All right. So I'm ZombieWolfFreakiod, and we are going to be continuing our journey down the rabbit hole today with part 3 of Kingdom Hearts. We're going to be going through actually a lot more games today. A couple of them are tied together, so it's a little bit weird, but we're going to go through 3 major sections again. And we're going to be starting with Birth by Sleep, but I think you have a little PSA for us first.
Yeah, so as always, I'm just going to put the spoiler disclaimer out there right off the bat that we will be talking about the in-depths of these games and possibly spoiling things. So if you don't want to see that, stop now, come back later. As we've mentioned previously, there are many really good YouTube channels that have some recaps or full playthroughs of the story. I was actually rewatching Playframes 358 over 2 days, and there are a few more pieces about Shion surrounding the appearance of Sora's face that we actually learn near the end of that game. Basically, it's that she is implied to have been created much like Replica Riku, came in as a blank slate. Because of the relationship she starts forming with Roxas, she starts imprinting a number of Sora's memories. She starts looking like a black-haired version of Kairi because it's imprinting Sora's memories of Kairi first. As she imprints more things, Sora's face shows up because of just the quantity of memories that are coming over. That is why it happens, and so it's a little bit more than just it's not explained. It actually did get explained in that game, which is good. That they didn't sort of leave you hanging and bring it up, 3 games down the road. So
I
yes,
knew that had happened. I did not know that that they revealed it within that game, which is why I hadn't said it yet. So thank
yes.
you for clarifying that. Yes, some of that stuff does come up. She does sacrifice herself to go back into Sora to give those memories back, so that whole
And I still
process
hold
can
true that
continue.
I feel like that's the reason they made this come out after Kingdom Hearts 2, because it's one of those where, the hero sacrifice storyline would have made 2 less impactful at that point.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, let's jump in with today's. We are
Birth
starting with
by
Birth by
Sleep.
Sleep.
So, if you saw the end of Kingdom Hearts 2, because I think it was Kingdom Hearts 2 that had it, they gave you a nice little splash screen of what they called the tragic story with 3 people on it. We didn't know
Ooh.
anything about these people, and I believe it was also Kingdom Hearts 2 that brought in Lingering Will as a
Yes. Secret
optional
boss.
boss
Secret boss
who
fight.
who was uh, I haven't played him personally, but I understand he's very unforgiving as far as a boss fight goes. Um, he obviously was armor clad and led to giving you an idea of what to expect going into this. So Birth by Sleep originally came out on the PSP, which was interesting because this was the first time Sony got a handheld release on a Kingdom Hearts game versus Nintendo getting it. So I'm going to the story of it and just say I think this is by far my favorite that's been released to date. One of the main reasons is you actually, to get the full effect of the story, have to play through it 3 times. But you're playing through it 3 times because there are 3 protagonist characters, and you are seeing the story from each different person's perspective each time you play through the game. I think this was a way that allowed them to use less worlds overall and extend the overarching amount of game for, again, a mobile release, just to with the limitations that were available that way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So The three characters we're dealing with are Terra, Ventus, and Aqua. And you'll notice right off the bat that Ventus looks very familiar to Roxas and is actually voiced by the same person who did Roxas. So you're somewhat confused right off the bat that it's just, hey, why is Roxas here when he shouldn't be here? And as you play through, if you play through the way that they intended you to play through, you would play Terra's story first, Ventus's second, and finish it with Aqua.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Each character has a completely different play style, with Terra being very much a physical and guard heavy type of character, Ventus being a speed attack, and Aqua being your all out mage. When it comes to the play styles that they generally tried to lean you towards. So the rough story is that we are now going back way before anything from the first game, and you're being brought to the land of departure is where everything starts. And you have three Keyblade wielders who are training under a master by the name of Ericus. We are seeing the Mark of Mastery exam being taken by both Terra and Aqua, and it's being overseen by another person by the name of Xehanort, which, if you didn't see the bad guy, because, you know, Disney does a really good job of showing off their villains, and this did that same sort of Disney-esque style of, he clearly looks like the villain.
He's clearly the villain. He talks like the villain. He walks like the villain. He acts like the villain. And everybody in the story is like, hey, you're a good guy.
Yeah. So, Aqua passes, Terra fails. And
you suck.
So that I'm not getting into that one right now. So Terra is basically coerced by Xehanort to go and prove himself by going out into the world and just doing a whole bunch of things, whether it's above the water or not. So he leaves abruptly. Master Ericus asks Aqua to follow him and keep an eye on him of what he's doing. And Ventus kind of gets caught in the middle of this whole thing.
He's Ventus.
So they all end up going off from the land of departure. Shocking that they would leave the land of departure. And they go into a bunch of various Disney worlds. The thing that I really like about this one is we finally get a change of the Disney worlds. So everything had been focused around, Alice in Wonderland, Agrabah, The Nightmare Before Christmas. A whole bunch of those were just constantly being reused. This was the first time that I believe the first initial three were Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty.
Yep, those. I don't know if those were the first three, but those were definitely in the rotation. Yeah.
And everything was, I believe, I may be wrong about this, but it was brand new Disney worlds across the board. They didn't reuse any of them. The only time I think they reused any of the past ones was they had this mini game that was a Monopoly style type thing. And I know for a fact the 100 Acre Wood was there because I definitely played that one. So anyway, they end up going through a bunch of their own pathway through the Disney worlds. Each of them, they start off in a different one. I know that for a fact. And they will eventually cross over the various other worlds that the other people have been to. So at various points in time, you will see things that have been affected by other people that got there before you, or you were the first one to that world to make a change that someone else would see the effects of. And the paths cross at Radiant Garden, which we find out in Kingdom Hearts 2 was what Hollow Bastion was before the Heartless attacks.
Before it was Hollow Bastion.
And before it was Hollow Bastion. We meet many of the members of Organization 13 before they are nobodies and their actual real selves. I don't know what real is anymore, so... and there's a bunch of crossovers between the three of them meeting up at various major points. You know, Terra obviously going down more of a path of darkness than I think he realizes. Aqua being the very high and mighty, pious one, and Ventus just, crying in the corner asking if everyone can just get along.
Just wanting mommy and daddy to stop fighting.
Yes. So that continues all the way to the ending, which is around the Keyblade graveyard, where Terra realizes he has screwed up.
Even being evil.
And, having defeated Master Ericus without realizing that that's what Xehanort wanted all the time, being possessed by Xehanort. And the ending is the culmination of the three of them trying to fight Xehanort to try and defeat him. I know I've missed some details, so feel free to fill in a bunch of the holes that I've left there.
You missed a few of them in there.
Yep.
The key thing for the overarching story that we learn here is we learn what Xehanort's overall goal is at this point, but also what kind of implies his goal later on as well. And that is he wants to create the Keyblade. Not the Keyblade that you're using to fight with, but the Keyblade as in it's the Greek letter key, which is basically an X. He wants to create that Keyblade, which is a whole different thing, which apparently is also something related to Kingdom Hearts, as in unlocking Kingdom Hearts. And this is a mythical, powerful weapon that he wants to create. The way he believes you can create it, or that he understands you can create it, is by having equal parts light and dark meet in a fight, basically. And we learn at the end of Ventus's story that he's actually the good side of basically, like, he's pure good. And then there's this other motorbike riding helmeted dude riding around that we meet every once in a while, and that's actually his dark side. They call him Vanitas. And the whole point is he wants the two of them to fight and create the Keyblade, which actually they do, but then you fight inside the Keyblade as Ventus and break it apart. Nobody really understands how all of that works. After all of that, Ventus is basically comatose, and Aqua takes him and hides him away to protect him because Terra is gone. Nobody really knows where at that point, but he's gone, and Aqua is trying to save Ventus, so she goes and locks him away somewhere. I think those are the highlight story bits that you kind of missed there.
Yeah, I think sorry, you said that Aqua hides Ventus away.
Yes.
So the one other piece that we do find out is she locks him in the castle that was on the Land of Departure.
Yeah.
And that ends up being turned into Castle Oblivion. So that's just that is a piece that comes at the end of that. It's worth noting that just from the standpoint of now we know where Castle Oblivion came from.
Yeah, and she turns it into Castle Oblivion so that people will lose their memories when they go into it, so that they can't find him and everything. Also locks it with her own Keyblade, so she's the only one that can unlock it.
Yes.
Other interesting notes quickly. We do actually revisit stories from previous Disney worlds that we visited to. You actually go to Peter Pan, which we've previously been to, but it's a different world in the sense of in the only other time we've been to Peter Pan, we were on a pirate ship. Here we're actually getting to be on the land in the Peter Pan world. So it is slightly different, but there is that slight crossover in a certain sense there. And the other is that their master is named Master Ericus, which is square backwards. Enix is the one that makes the game. It's very creative.
Yes, very much so.
Kind of like all their names, Ventus, Aqua, Terra, the three elements kind of. Yeah, they weren't very subtle with their naming and storytelling. They were kind of filling in gaps at this point.
Yep. So, as far as combat goes, I would say that this was very much on par with anything that we got on the PlayStation 2 as a console. The one thing that I think they introduced this time around that I appreciated was their, I'm going to call it materia synthesis, because that's really how it felt, in
Yep.
that you earned orbs for the various magic spells that you had, and you would synthesize them together to try and make more powerful ones, a la what they did with Crisis Core, which I believe Crisis Core was out around the same time. So you can definitely see that they borrowed some things back and forth between those.
Yeah. And so from my perspective, I played this game when they put it into one of their compilation packs. So I didn't play it on the handheld, but I played it when it was actually on PS3 and kind of up-resed or whatever. Like, it was looking as pretty as any of the other games in the series. And I'll say, this is the first time that first time. There's only been 2 mainline numbered games from the beginning at this point, but Kingdom Hearts 1 to 2 was a mechanical and gameplay leap forward. They learned and they grew. This was the next time that happened, because all the other mobile games and all that sort of stuff, as much as it had fun stuff, they weren't really good mechanic upgrades. This was a mechanical upgrade. This changed the game and actually was a lot more fun than Kingdom Hearts 2 in some ways. So it was like, oh, this is good, we should keep doing this kind of thing.
Yes.
And they do leverage that. They do continue to learn those lessons and take those lessons into the next games that they create, which is great, because this was the first game that I played where I legitimately enjoyed some of the mechanics, gameplay wise.
And as much as they had a lot storyline wise, I think this was the game that I absolutely loved the story in, out of all of the we've seen thus far.
Those interweaving stories and cross sections were a lot of fun. Yeah.
This is probably a good time to then move into Dream Drop Distance.
Dream Drop Distance, yay!
Which we go back to Nintendo for another handheld. This one was the 3DS. And I will say I did play this on the 3DS, where they intentionally took advantage of the 3D. I think they went on a bit of a hype train for 3D. I will say this much: I did not enjoy the 3D. In general, I didn't enjoy the 3D on the 3DS, and this one was no different. Because of the way in which you're constantly moving the camera around, I found it very dizzying to try and watch it in 3D.
Now, this game, a lot like Birth by Sleep, did get a port onto the consoles in their expansion packs. From what I understand, it gets the same treatment as Birth by Sleep. So when you play it on those consoles in those packages, it is just as pretty as the mainline games, and mechanically those systems that may have felt a little bit rough on the handheld become very fluid and work really well when you get them into the full console game. So from what I understand, this is a great game when they brought it up, basically, but on the 3DS, it wasn't everybody's favorite.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah. All right. So story-wise, so I'll just give a little bit of a precursor for the story on this one. This isn't specifically related to the story, but it is a relevant part of this game. This game, they introduce the characters from The World Ends With You. That was part of their tie-in with the 3DS.
Yes.
And that was utterly fantastic, because those characters are great, and there's a really rich story going on there that they really played off of in this game. And it permeates the entire going to the worlds kind of story that you do within this one. It was really well done. And I think that really, people really tied onto that, because there's a really big following for The World Ends With You specifically, and I think those people really were drawn into this, especially if they were already Kingdom Hearts fans. This kind of melded 2 things they really enjoyed, and in a good way, not a negative way, right? So,
and it's another Square Enix title, so of course they're going to try and milk as much as they can.
So that was a really cool thing. So the core concept for this game, basically, Kingdom Hearts 2 has ended, and all of the problems that have arisen from that have happened. People have done things. Basically, we're kind of like, okay, bad stuff is happening. We kind of learned that, like, there's all these bad guys out there, and we now kind of have an understanding that Xehanort is a thing and going around trying to cause some shenanigans. um so in order to be prepared for this, for the coming battles that will have to happen, um since we have just learned of this thing called the Mastery, which was introduced in Birth by Sleep, the Mark of Mastery, which nobody really knows if this actually means anything, but they all talk about it like it's very important. Um, it's decided that we need to train some new Keyblade wielders, i.e., Kyrie, but nobody really knows if that's going to work or if she can even wield a Keyblade. But we're going to try anyways, and that's why she's not on screen. And we need to give Riku and um, Sora the Mark of Mastery exam. Now, if you played Birth by Sleep, you'd be thinking, "Oh, that's pretty easy. They got a duel, and then they decide which one of them succeeds. Cool. This is going to be a quick game." No. So the Mark of Mastery exam is specific to each individual trainer, and it can be whatever they want, whatever they decide is the right test for that individual. We learn that Yen Sid, aka Disney backwards, was actually a Keyblade master way back when, so he can actually administer the Mark of Mastery exam. So he decides to give Riku and Sora the Mark of Mastery exam, which means they must go into the world of dreams, the sleeping worlds, dream drop into those worlds. Title. They must drop into
No
those
gummy ship
worlds
this time.
and wake them up. They must learn how to wake up these sleeping worlds, learn the power of waking, and that will be their mastery exam. Sora needs this because he needs to learn the power of waking, because that's important for other reasons, and Riku just needs to do his thing, be Riku. He needs to gain control over the light and darkness. That's their Mark of Mastery exam. Do this. And for that to be a valid test, they need to forget all of their abilities and all of their special scratch. So they do this. You go in, you go through Disney worlds, you go through the sleeping worlds, aka the worlds you played in previous games, aside from The World Ends With You, and try to wake the world, whatever that means. I mean, it's basically the same deal as the other ones, find the heart of the world kind of deal. In the midst of all of this, some Organization 13 members and other people start going around and messing with Sora, telling him he's useless, and trying to throw him off and get him to fall into darkness, and all this weird sort of stuff. Yeah, and it kind of works. He kind of gets angry and throws him off his path, and that's a thing that happens throughout the story. Riku tries to help, but he can't. And then the game ends, and Yen Sid goes, "Riku, you passed your exam. Sora, you sucked, and you don't pass your exam. So you are going to have to go learn the power of waking the hard way." And then the game ends, and we go,
That's
"Wait,
for
what?
another time.
Wait, what? We have to learn it a different way?" Yeah, that's Kingdom Hearts 3. So that's basically the game for Dream Drop Distance.
Yes. Once again, I appreciated that they brought in another whole set of new Disney worlds yet again.
Some
I
of them
know sure.
Yeah.
I think what it is that they're now at a point now where instead of using the same core set of worlds and plastering that constantly throughout the same set of games, they're expanding and trying to bring in other Disney worlds that people remember being important, so that we get to see some different things.
And I think part of that came from, like, these games were starting to actually be successful at this point. So, like, as in, it had a following, it had a culture around it. So Disney was okay with letting a few more of their IP pieces go to them, kind of saying like, "Oh yeah, you can create that because people are liking these," So it wasn't free reign, but they were definitely giving them different things that they could actually do. So they actually had a little bit more variety. You weren't just going to Agrabah every single freaking time. You could actually go to other worlds, and sure, they brought some back, but it wasn't the same repetition. They iterated on those same worlds and changed them up. It wasn't just the same pieces over and over. So you can go to some of those previous worlds. Like, I forget which one it is where you actually do go back to Agrabah again. But now you get to play through the Aladdin 2 story rather than the Aladdin 1 story again. You actually get to see new content. So like Disney was freeing them up to actually do some of that. So that was really nice. I agree. It was really nice to see some of that repetition broken up and some freedom. And the World Ends With You characters really throw in a fun vibe in there. And you get to play around with those characters and play off of some of those characters, which is just fantastic. So.
Yeah, I think my favorite in this one was one of the very first ones that put you in, which was from the Hunchback of Notre Dame. The whole cathedral that they had set up there was just fantastic to play through. So
that was a fun one.
And I mean, it's just, as far as the actual other gameplay elements, because the one thing that we didn't touch on were the Dream Eaters.
True. They introduced Pokemon.
So basically, they introduced. I don't know if it's Pokemon per se, because I feel like they joined you in real time as opposed to it being a turn-based combat.
Sorry, Monster Rancher.
Yes, that one.
You could level them up. You could get new ones. It's just you gotta catch them all. So.
Exactly, and then bring in the best ones for whatever it is that you're fighting, and let them basically do the heavy lifting for you. The other thing that this added in was this, I believe, was the first outside of Chain of Memories, because I don't really count that because stupid card games. This was the first real opportunity that you got to play as Riku, because you had both the sides of Sora and Riku that you were needing to play. So
a lot like Birth by Sleep, you do have two sides to the story you can play as. And while they don't intersect in the same sorts of ways as Birth by Sleep, they do have cross sections, and they are, because that whole, like I was talking about, the people trying to mess with Sora, so Rico is trying to help, and so they are kind of going like this. So I agree with that. And it was the first time you really got to experience him as a playable character.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's good there. I guess we'll move into, this is the one that makes my head hurt.
Oh boy, yep.
So, we're going to talk about, I guess it's Kingdom Hearts Key and
Cross.
Union Key. Sorry, Cross.
It's called
Kingdom
Cross.
Hearts Cross, Union Cross, and the Cross back cover.
So, the Cross back cover is actually just back cover, I think. I don't remember if it actually has the pre subtitle, but it's Cross and Union Cross. So this series of games is very, very weird. The reason for this is multiple levels. So one is, so I should start by breaking it up into two. So Cross and Union Cross are games that go hand in hand. And we'll talk about them in a sec. I'll start with back cover because it's a lot easier to get through and it's a lot easier to explain. Back cover was a cinematic. It wasn't actually a game. There was no gameplay to it. It's a cinematic section that was designed to explain a little bit about what's going to happen in Cross and Union Cross, or what did happen. I forget which order it kind of went in, but it was a cinematic section designed to explain some of that stuff, but also set up some information that will become relevant at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3. But this is that's kind of the setting that it's trying to do. So back cover is a cinematic. It's just a short series of videos that release this information. Basically, we learn that there's this person called the Master of Masters. So he's the guy who trains all the masters. He's also wearing that wonderful dark hood that we see all the organization members wearing. Now, we also know that, I don't know if we know this at this point, but we learn it soon enough. This is actually way, way back. So this is before any of the other content that we've learned at this point. So this guy was wearing it before Organization 13, basically. And he has 6 apprentices. And 5 of them lead these thing called unions. And they basically lead them. They wear masks that are representation of animals. And they're just supposed to lead these unions and gather light and who knows what, doesn't matter. He basically says, okay, I'm going to leave. And they're like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm leaving. I'm going to give you all the Book of Prophecies, which is a book that tells you everything that's going to happen from now on. And you get to use that, go have fun. He gives that to the 5 of them, and then he gives the 6th one. He says, okay, here's my Keyblade, and here's a box. Don't do any of what these guys are doing. Just leave and go watch. And obviously, having foreknowledge of what's going on, the union leaders, who are now called the foretellers, basically they make a mess out of everything because they learn there's a traitor in their midst, but they're trying to figure out who it is by reading the book. But the book was written by the master who wanted them to fight. A whole bunch of shenanigans happen. They end up fighting. They end up causing a whole bunch of destruction, and they end up causing the Keyblade. And then that's kind of how that story goes. And then we learn that this other 6th apprentice was actually just supposed to watch this and move through time with the same Keyblade he's using. It has a big eye in it. That's how the Master of Masters knows what's going to happen, because as the Keyblade goes through time, he can see what's happened in that time. That's how he wrote the book. And he gave them different books, which is why they all fought. Who cares? Basically, they fought, they created the Keyblade War, stuff happened. All right. That's that cinematic. There's no gameplay.
The one thing I think what's worth noting about this right off the bat is these were mobile-only games.
And the cinematic wasn't. The cinematic only came out during the...
Sorry, yes. So Cross and Union Cross, though, were mobile games.
So that's the next section that we're going to talk about now. Yes, these are mobile games.
And these ones are unfortunately unavailable to play today. So if you...
Union Cross...
No, they are not available. I've checked.
Oh, okay. Union Cross is down now? Okay.
We'll get to it later, but Dark Road is the only thing that is available to play today.
Okay.
So if you missed out on them, as I've mentioned before, Playframe has a full story playthrough of that. I recommend that because I did play a bit of Union Cross, and my goodness, it is the mobile grind of grinds. It is not a fun grind to get through the story. So it's one of those things where I gave up on it and just watched the playthrough because I had enough trying to grind through for that. It was a simplistic mobile game. Nothing really to write home about, but worth watching anyone who's done a playthrough video of it just to understand the storyline aspects.
So Playframe was a great one that did a playthrough of that with the story and everything. If you want a real comprehensive look with all the cinematics and everything cut together, Everglow, the channel, is absolutely fantastic. They've done cinematic run-throughs of all of it, including translated versions of some of the Japanese only content that we couldn't even possibly have gotten. And additional things, they've also cut them into big long cinematic sections so you can just watch it all together. There's no gameplay in between, so you don't even have to sift through any of the grinding. It's literally just a cinematic. They don't do any voiceover because these games are mobile games. There is no voices, so you do have to read the whole thing and everything. But the amount of work they did put into it is utterly fantastic, and they're definitely worth a watch and a follow if you want to check out these storyline things. They also do timeline videos for Kingdom Hearts, those are also great, so check those out. But yes, so these games were somewhat short-lived in a certain sense, but also not. And because we have Jimmy here, I'm going to equate them to a Final Fantasy thing because that's the world he knows. Um, so Cross and Union Cross are a lot like what happened with Final Fantasy 14. So with the original Final Fantasy 14 and then the rebirth of that world. So Cross was a mobile only game. It was actually only available in Japan. That game never came over here. And they didn't really know if it was going to be successful or whatever. I don't know what they were thinking. But once again, they decided to put critical content into this story. And we couldn't get access to it. It was very weird. So what happened was they got to the end of that story and they decided that they would make a game that everybody could play, but they couldn't make it the exact same game, but they wanted to put that content in there. So they made Union Cross, which is a rebirth of the Cross games. Same gameplay, same style, all that sort of stuff. And you play through it, but now things are slightly different and it's actually built upon what happened. Actually, are learning what happened in the previous one while you're playing this one and learning new information. Very strange. And you get to the end and the story of that one ends, and that also leads into to Kingdom Hearts 3 stuff and future work. Now, the story you play through in this time is the Keyblade War, the Keyblade War, and then the post. And that's why back cover is tied into this, because it explains from the foreteller's perspective the Keyblade War, how it came about, all that sort of stuff. Now, we know all of this stuff by playing Birth by Sleep, that the Keyblade War happened. There's the Keyblade graveyard filled with all. This is it happening. And every player that was playing the mobile game online was one Keyblade wielder in the world that ended up fighting in this Keyblade War. And this will actually come back in Kingdom Hearts 3. They do a call out to all the people who played the mobile game by actually having their names in a credit section as part of the game, as like the leaderboard is actually scrolls through in a relevant section of the game as all the Keyblade wielders who fought in the Keyblade War to help create what the story is now. So very interesting, really cool tie-in. The entirety of that story is complex, convoluted, and mostly complete and utter nonsense. This is how they explain how time travel works. And just don't even try to understand it, because it's not worth it. I'll be honest. It's just not worth trying to understand how it works. Remember how we talked about data and how it became real? Oh, they bring that back in a hard way. Union Cross actually happens inside data, and then you have to get out of the data to time travel, but then the data actually becomes nonsense. Utter nonsense. So the important parts from all of this is that the original Cross game is before the Keyblade War. You actually meet the foretellers, and they actually start the Keyblade War. We have some interactions where we learn about the Master of Masters and the one apprentice that's given the box and what happens there and the prophecies and all these different things. We learn all this different information. The end of that game leads to some of the characters in that game, the NPCs, becoming the new Union leaders, and all the Keyblade wielders fighting and dying, and then some of them being saved, and those ones being put into a data world so that they can continue to preserve the light and the Keyblade wielders, but they have their memory wiped because they can't have remembered that there was a war, because that would be bad, apparently. So then Union Cross, these new characters that we now know as the NPCs from the previous game, are our Union leaders. We're playing again as a character in these unions. We're trying to figure out what's going on. They know us, we don't know them. Blah, blah, we're inside data. Maleficent shows up. There's this random blob. Darkness takes a real intangible form, and we learn that darkness is the actual enemy. Like, physical darkness is the actual villain that we're fighting. Somehow, nobody knows why or how that all works. It just is. once again, I said it's convoluted and not worth figuring out unless you watch those videos that actually explain it in more detail. Um, the key points here is Ventus is here. He's actually one of the NPC union leaders. He exists here. He's actually a character, and this is actually where he started. And a few other characters that kind of maybe look like they could be familiar or relevant, but we don't really know. Turns out they might be. Who knows? The end of the whole Union Cross game sees the entirety of the world destroyed. Travel. The darkness escapes and time travels. Some of our NPCs escape and time travel. And obviously Ventus escapes and time travels. And all of that, they get scattered throughout time, which is how they show up in various different games across various different places. So one of our NPCs ends up being the person who creates the world that we will later learn will be the place that Ericus learned to become a Keyblade Master in. As well as Xehanort, but we'll learn that later. Another one of them shows up in that same time, around the same time that Xehanort comes into existence. Ventus obviously goes forward all the way to Birth by Sleep, which is where Xehanort picks him up when he's old. And a few other people go to a few other different places. Yeah, I think that's basically how that all goes.
On that note, now that my head hurts again, this is probably a good place to just call it the time for the final question.
So
we're a little bit over at this point. So.
Yeah, we are. I did remember one key important factor that I wanted to point out though quickly before we go to the final question, and that is Birth by Sleep. There's two important sections in that game that we did skip over. Details that happen. One is Terra, in one of his adventures, ends up going to this random island called the Island of Destiny and meeting this little kid named Riku and saying, "Hey, you look like you could be a Keyblade Master." And he goes, "What's that?" He goes, "Don't worry, you'll never remember this." And then he leaves. So Riku met with Terra, and that's actually how he kind of plants a spark in there. The other one is that Kairi wasn't there at that point. She was actually somewhere else. And actually, another person meets her. That person is Aqua. She meets with a very young Kairi as she's running from darkness. And we actually learn that they had a brief interaction, which is also part of why Kairi's important later on. So there's a couple of cross-pollinations in there that come back. All right. Sorry. After my ramblings about all of that, let's go to final question because those games are just...
So this is quite relevant at this point now. I figured this was a great time to bring this up, and that is we've introduced a number of characters at this point throughout things. Also, who's your favorite or who do you resonate with the most?
Donald.
Out of everyone that we brought out. What's that?
Donald.
It looks like a good place for some ingredients.
Hey, we're not there yet.
Oh, right. No, so characters that I resonate with. There's a lot of good characters. There's also a lot of really bad characters in some of these games, or at least poorly written characters. For all you were saying, like Birth by Sleep is like one of the more fun games in terms of story and all that sort of stuff. But then also like Aqua, Terra, and Ventus are actually written some of the worst out of all the characters that we've met this far. Like they're so naive and just like not even looking at the obvious things and then like wondering why everything went badly. It's like, oh my goodness. But that's a really hard one. I mean, Sora's the obvious choice because he's meant to be the protagonist from the early games. And that makes a lot of sense. I like to think that I connect a little bit more with Riku, you know, got that dark edge to you, you know, and the darkness and that sort of thing, and like to think I'm better than I actually am. So I'd probably say that Riku would probably be the one that I'd connect with the most out of the mainline cast that we've met so far. So that would be my answer. What about yourself?
I think that of all the people that we have met thus far, and it didn't really come into play until 358 over 2 days. I really enjoy Axel.
Yeah.
I think he's got some of the. It's one of those things where he comes off in Chain of Memories as, you know, the. The only way I can describe him is Reno from FF7. I don't know how to put it into any other words than that.
Yeah.
But when you actually see him on the 358 over 2 days aspect of things, he actually seems to have that more caring, nurturing side to him where he cares about Roxas and Shion more so than anyone else does. And I I can appreciate that as the tough guy who, you know, wants to back his friends. So
Yeah, you really see his human side, that kind of big brother side to him, rather than just
yeah,
the
that.
rough edge that he shows to everybody else because he doesn't like them so much.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
no,
that would be my
good,
answer.
that's a good answer. Axel's a great character. So yeah,
And actually, as a funny side note, I'm gonna do this quickly because we're really running out of time on this one. But as much as I mentioned in Kingdom Hearts 2 with Roxas looking like the bait and switch we got in Metal Gear Solid 2, Axel is actually voiced by Raiden from Metal Gear Solid 2.
nice, very nice.
All right, with that, I think we do need to call it an episode. So
Probably.
I know this was a long one. Thank you for bearing with us on that. I hope you enjoyed this. If you are looking for us outside of this, you can find us at the Howling Gamers on the various social media platforms. The other spot to find us is I'm not as of yet because things have been busy during the Christmas holidays, but my YouTube channel, CyberWolfJimmy, and my social media handle, CyberWolfJimmy, is where you can find out what we will be doing at some point in the future. It'll either be myself or both of us. Hopefully it'll be both of us. I have some ideas I need to run by that I think could be fun for both of us to get involved in stuff. So yeah.
And if you want to connect with us and just chat, we do usually try to stream this live on YouTube, which we're doing right now. So you can watch us on our YouTube, which is in the description, or if you are watching, it's at the bottom of this video, but then you don't need it because you're actually watching the video. So you're already here. If you're watching the video, you can also go to our Discord up there. That is also in the description if you're listening to this on a podcast, where you can ask us questions. If you're watching live, you can ask us questions while we chat. But check out those locations as well. And other than that, I think that's all we need to say. But until the next time, we'll see you all then.
Yep. Have a great night.